But since the cabinet outnumbers the board members currently at the moment, Dr. DeLeon asked me to start. I'd like to introduce one of our facilitators today. Dr. DeLeon is here. Chris is also here. Dr. DeLeon is from Florida. Chris is from Philadelphia. Together they make up an amazing consulting team that brought us through the first retreat where we examined some of our data. We'll get into a deeper data dive today. And then if everyone remembers the house, right? We've got the vision and mission at the top, and then we start to get down into priorities. The boards today will be working specifically surrounding those priorities. What do they want?
For the record, why don't I say this is the May 9th workshop?
I was just doing an intro and I was going to turn it to you.
I like that. It's 9:04, and we were at the Collaboratory on Jackson Street. Now you may continue.
All right, so I'm going to turn it back to
Mr.
Mr. Persons for the business. So they're going to be helping us define the priorities. They're going to really look at what the big buckets are that they would like all of us and all of our representative departments and divisions to be working on. They will also begin to start thinking about and scoping some of the objective work with the idea that that would give us an idea of what they're looking for as we try to reach those priorities, what they would like to see as a priority for us to consider about objectives. Our work then, once this retreat is over, will be then to take those priorities and those beginnings of draft objectives back to our world and our work so we can determine what activities, what initiatives, and what metrics, and then we define those objectives in a smart way, right? Specific, measurable, and we look at, and we make sure that we have objectives that we can not only reach, but that we can clearly measure with clear metrics, and then we bring back to the board for the board's approval. So we're starting at the top of the house, we're continuing to work down, but as a cabinet level, it's really important for you to listen today so that we can determine how to work up to those priorities and meet at that objective level where we have consistency between the board and our work. So I'll turn it back to the chairman at this point for the official start of the meeting, which I guess he already did. And do we want to introduce, do we need to introduce ourselves so everybody knows we're here or we're live?
Yeah, we'll go around the table. I'll just start. I'm Armor Persons, Chair.
Sam Fisher, Vice Chair.
Kathleen Morgan.
Chris Petrino.
Debbie Jordan.
Christopher Berninger, Superintendent.
All right, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chairman Persons. Thank you to the board for being here, and Dr. Bernier, Superintendent, for welcoming us and framing the day. And thank you to the Cabinet for being here and working with us and alongside of us to advance this refreshed strategic plan. My name is Justin DeLeon. I'm here with my colleague, Chris Edmonds. We're here to really take the next step, as Dr. Bernier has framed, to move the refreshed strategic plan forward. But before we get into that, and I invite everyone in the room to think about this and do this activity. If you could just take a Post-it, or if you have a sheet of paper already in front of you. 3 things you want the refreshed plan to achieve. What will it achieve? What are 3 things that the refreshed plan will achieve? In your mind, from where you sit, from where you work and operate, what are 3 things that you really want this plan to achieve? Don't worry about brain size, any 3 things. We're just reflecting, writing down. All right, seeing the writing slowing down, a few people still writing. All right, so just keep those in mind for a moment. We're going to come back to them. We're going to switch gears just for a brief moment, I want you to choose one of these things. You can only maintain one of these things in your life, of these 3, sports, music, or reading. If you don't like any of these three things, well then, this works out well for you. But that may not be the case. Sports, music, reading. Choose one. Choose one. Got yours?
No, I think you said maintain. What do you mean by maintain?
Hard. Oh, it's, so only one of these things can continue to be a part of your life.
Okay.
From this decision forward. The
Clarify.
other two disappear.
Okay.
From your life.
Oh, boy. Forced choice.
It's not Sophie's choice, so it's okay.
It's not Sophie's
And
choice.
if any of the board members or Dr. Bernier, you want to share, be curious to know what you choose.
Well, since you called me out by
One.
name, I chose reading.
Chose reading, okay. Others?
2 years ago, it would have been sports, but now I would go with reading.
Now you go with me, okay.
Reading.
Okay,
Sports.
sports,
I knew you'd say sports.
Shocker.
all right.
Same with me.
So going back to
Sports?
the three objectives or accomplishments, right, that you want to achieve, choose one. If you had to choose one, you don't have to share that one. Not yet. Choose one.
So hard on the That's like saying your children were born in a certain order, so it's easy.
All right. So as Dr. Bernier framed the day, we talked about refining priorities, getting more clear in scope and narrowing them, defining them further. Same thing with objectives, right? We're going to get into beginning to draft those objectives that the cabinet will pick up on, further define and create, continue to create the contents of the refresh plan. And we know that part of the mindset coming into today is narrowing, focusing, having conversation, asking questions to help us get there. Fortunately, we have a lot of input from different stakeholder groups, from surveys, from live sessions that's going to help us on our way, and data that we can refer back to. But I just asked, and Chris and I asked, that you channel this mindset as we get into our work for today. Okay? We introduced ourselves briefly. I would also like to acknowledge our colleague Lauren Schulten. She has been supporting us behind the scenes. She's in Louisville, Kentucky, enjoyed the Derby this weekend, and is very much supporting us. Good morning. Very much supporting us and helping to move our work forward. Couple of quick items to help us align on where we are and just set the context for the day and continue to do that. Today we're at board retreat number 2, and what we want to do is really go back to our strategic direction, mission, vision, values. There seemed to be quite a bit of alignment around that last time. We got some input from different stakeholder groups that we want you to look at and have a final conversation about that within the retreat, and of course provide feedback in the refresh plan once that's drafted. The majority of the work today, though, is getting us as quickly as possible to our priorities and objectives. So defining what those priorities are, potentially synthesizing and consolidating them, depending on where the board and Dr. Bernier take that conversation, and then beginning to define and draft those objectives, just getting them in place for the cabinet to pick up on and continue to work on and clarify those. After today, the job of the Education Elements team is to really synthesize the conversation and then put an initial draft of the refreshed plan together for your feedback, of course for the cabinet's feedback as well. And also, I know Dr. Savage is going to be working with each of the cabinet members to further define the objectives based on the conversation today, and as well begin to put initiatives and actions in place to extend and bring those objectives to life. Okay? And we're still on track to launch and present the refresh plan in June, I believe later in the month. Last time we were together, and actually I'm going to use this more visual example here. Last time we were together, we did really 3 things. We took some time to set the strategic direction. If you remember, I asked a question and Chris asked a question, what do we want students to think, see, feel, and do as a result of their career in the school district? And we did some brainstorming around that. That helped to form and inform a discussion around mission and vision, which also led to a conversation about values. If you recall, we did that kind of spider chart where we looked at where, how close or how far we are from living the values. We also spent time discussing and reviewing district performance data. We looked at the Cognia survey data from educators, from students, from families as well. The other data set that we looked at was interview data, right? So that was interviews from a number of the chiefs and cabinet members from each of you, right? And then we used all the data and the conversation that began to inform some shaping of priorities, okay? And since then, what the Ed Elements team did was we essentially took all these inputs, we synthesized them, we went back to the data, and we created a draft initial list of priorities that we're going to present back to you today. From that time, though, when we were last together, so we have an initial list of 7. We also gave a survey out to a number of different groups here in the district, EDAC, DAC, the CSI group. We also had the privilege to facilitate a live session with the DAC group as well. And what we did was we said, here's the list of 7 priorities. How would you rank them? They also provided an input on a survey. And we asked them questions like, what does it look like to thrive in this priority area? What are some of the headwinds we might face? What's unique about this level, this grade band level, that might not be as applicable to other grade band levels or is particularly relevant in your grade band level? Know that in a few slides, I'm going to show you a link to our auxiliary data for today, which is a lot of data from last time. We use Jamboard. You have access to all of these Jamboards. So should you want to see what any of the groups shared on that night, it's there for everybody in the room to look at and access. What I would say, though, too, is a number of the Post-its on the Jamboard are virtual Post-its. Some of them, the grain size is very broad, right? So objective level, some of it is much more focused, more acute. And so that might be of particular help for the cabinet as you're beginning to think about objectives and then more so actions and initiatives. So it could give you some nice perspective or validate what you're already aware of, okay? Last thing I'll say, this is not the last time we're going to be engaging these groups. So the idea is that after today, again, we draft a refresh plan. We share that back with a number of different groups across the district to give us feedback before we finalize it and present it. Okay, so today what we're doing is really refining our strategic direction, so mission, vision, values. Chris is going to lead us through a few different thought exercises there. Define our priority areas. So we have input and feedback via a survey and a few other data sources to help potentially narrow, but mostly to help us revisit it and have a discussion about what our priorities are, what do they mean, and what does success look like. That's going to lead us into our final section for today, which is drafting objectives. That's beginning to influence and inform what those objectives are, right? And again, that the cabinet picks up on and helps to define those further, which lead to initiatives and actions. The agenda is there. In case you'd like to see the flow of the day, know that the agenda is there. I'll keep coming back to this agenda and our objectives, so no need to really access it unless you're curious. And then framing our project. I know I've used this slide a couple of times with probably all of you in this room, but again, we're working on refreshing, right? We're working on adapting and reflecting on what the current plan is and prioritizing, which is very much what we're doing today, right? As opposed to building new or just adding on to the existing plan. In the afternoon, when we get to the objective section, there's a few different banks of information, and we're going to ask you to access and provide access to the current plan as a place where you can potentially pull ideas, right, inspiration for objectives from, okay? All right, so again, mission and vision values, that's going to be our first thing. We want to really lock in our priorities as much as we can and feel good about them and have some nice discussion about that to make sure everybody's on the same page and begin to shape what these objectives are. We're not going to be getting down to this initiative, project, or actions level. Should ideas come up, of course, we'll record that and share that back with the cabinet for you to have. But also, what we do is invite the cabinet to think about, as the discussion is happening, as you're thinking and reflecting with us, if you know of initiatives or projects or actions that need to be maintained or things that need to be added, start writing those down, right? You probably already have a list, you're probably already thinking about this, but we invite you in to really stay in sync with us, right, and start thinking ahead, because this is going to be the next step after today, right? Wonderful. And just so everybody in the room is aware, anybody who may be joining us virtually as well, through this process, we've really tried to be intentional about including as many voices as we can to inform the refreshing of this plan. Right? We know we have a lot of surveys from the accreditation survey. We know that we've completed now most sections, right, except for the guidance to inform the launch, that still is open. But we've got feedback on mission, vision, values, on priority areas as well. And we've completed our interviews. So all that information is available to you in our auxiliary data packet, which you can access right there. So if you have a device, you like to access it, that's the bit.ly. Anybody in the room is welcome to look. From our first retreat, you'll notice a lot of the same data from last time. We've added a couple of new things, including some summary survey response data from the DAC, CSI, EDAC surveys responses. We've also added a link to the Jamboards, in case you're curious. And again, that was from when Chris, Dr. Savage, and I, we joined the DAC meeting and facilitated. Okay, so I'll give you a moment if you want to access that. Yeah, you know what, Chris, I can put out a chart paper too, so it's up.
Every time he says Chris, I turn.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to pass it over to Chris, and he's going to walk us through our mission, vision, values, and just checking out the data and the input that we got from different stakeholders, and then helping us to move forward.
Justin. And like we said, Justin's going to write this bit.ly link on chart paper, and we'll post it in a visual spot. But like he said, we'll be referencing this throughout the day, so board members, feel free to access this and have this up to access, and then cabinet team as well. If you want to take a look and follow along, this will be on chart paper shortly. And then quick logistics as well. Not sure if Justin mentioned this, but obviously snacks, water throughout the day. They're over here. Help yourself. If Cheez-Its and Cheez-Its bars, and just an assortment of goods over there. So help yourself. And then one other quick logistics. I know some folks already grabbed it, but coffee and water straight out there. So help yourself throughout the day as well, as you see fit. And so just as a recap for folks who are joining us, and then cabinet team members, we talked a lot about vision, mission, and values during our first board retreat. So the board team, Dr. B, we spent a lot of time here. And what we want to do today is just finalize our discussion and make sure we have some key recommendations to take through the normal board approval process as we go into the next couple months. So as some quick orientation, what is a vision? What is a mission, and what are values? You want to take a few moments just to orient yourself to what we're talking about when we're talking about those three components. And so as you all know, this is the foundation of our work when we're designing a strategic plan. And this lays all the work ahead of us in terms of when we jump into priorities and objectives, as we'll reference our vision, mission, and values, and make sure there's alignment in everything we do throughout the day. So that's why we like to start here. As Justin already mentioned, we'll use the metaphorical pyramid throughout the day, and we're going to start at the top, mission, vision, and values. So just a quick reference once again to where we're starting and where we're going. And in terms of where we are and what is currently in the strategic plan, we wanted to just orient everyone to the current vision as it's stated and the current mission. So this is where we are, and this is what is in there. In a moment, I'm going to show you some discussions that we had amongst the board team and Dr. B during our first retreat, but wanted to ground us in what is currently in the plan. And so in terms of our launching point for this discussion, we wanted to bring in some new data and some new information from our first board retreat. So this is in between early April and now. We leveraged a survey that Justin referenced. And in this survey, it was shared with chief advisory council members, directors, and executive directors. And we had 24 respondents. And in a moment, we're going to go over some of the data that we received related to mission, values, and vision from folks who took the survey. A couple quick notes, as you can see here, what the survey does and what it does not. We know that there's only 24 responses, and in an ideal world, we would have more input. However, we think it's a good launching point into discussions that we're about to jump into and can provide a backbone for some of the rationale for any changes or minor pivots we want to make. And as you can see, we want to make some other notes here if you just want to recap what the survey can do and what it will not do. Board members and Dr. B, any high-level questions about the data we're about to share and just the information we're going to present?
Oh, just a little point of business I forgot to mention earlier. Jada Langford Fleming had an appointment this morning, and she will be joining us a little bit later. Just wanted to go on the record for that, what we do about it. Okay, sorry.
Thank you for letting us know. And I'll speak a little bit louder.
It's just like school,
Yeah,
right?
got it.
No sooner does instruction start than the lawn.
Yeah, it's when the lawnmower's right behind you. So quick update on the survey and who took it. This is a breakdown of folks that we had take the survey. And as you can see, majority is DAC Advisory Council members. We had a good amount of CSI members take it as well. And you can see a smaller breakdown of folks here. And we just want to give you the sense of who took the survey. This is also in, did you put that post before that? This is also in the data slides once again. So if you want to follow along and you want to have this on your laptop, here's the bit.ly link, SDLC data pack. Just have that bit.ly at the front end as well. And if you need any help accessing this, just let Justin or I know. We can come and help you out. We had a question in terms of with what grade level are you mostly associated with? So this was mostly for those advisory council members or anyone who just wanted to identify what grade level do you mostly work with. And you can see it's a pretty even split, but we had a lot of elementary, a good amount of middle, and then some others as well. And so the protocol that we're going to use for mission and vision, and I want to give you the sense of what this will be before we jump into you all discussing and brainstorming, is we want to think about it through 3 lenses. So talking about the mission and vision. The first lens is keep as is. So that means that we like the mission and vision the way it is right now. And we're not going to propose any minor changes or any rewrites. So that's one lens to look through this protocol. The middle bucket, something for you to consider, is minor changes. We want to change some wording, we want to edit a certain piece. Thinking about what those changes will be. If you want to jump in and think through this lens, our only ask would be specific about what the changes that you are proposing. So really think about, I want to change X so that it becomes Y, and just be specific in those conversations that we're about to jump into. And then the third bucket, we want to keep this open in case it comes up, is a rewrite. If you feel there is a better mission or vision, and we should jump into discussion of a rewrite, keep that in mind as well. And our ask, if that is the case, is just make sure you have a proposal for what that would be. Board team members and Dr. B, any questions about the protocol that we're going to use in our discussion with mission and vision? Okay. So now I'm going to show you some data. And like I said, you can access the data on your laptops. You can also just follow along. And board team members, feel free to jot down any notes or questions that are coming up as we go through it. There isn't too much data for mission and vision. We kept it pretty simple in terms of our questioning for this survey. So there's about 3 or 4 questions that we just want to showcase and highlight to you. And then feel free to let me know if questions are coming up or more clarity is needed. So the first question we asked in that survey was, to what extent do you believe the current mission represents Lee County's reason for existing? And so we're talking about the mission here. And as you can see, here is the data breakdown for what folks who took the survey, what they thought. So board team members, if you want to jot down anything, feel free. I'll move to the next slide in a few moments. In terms of the vision, we asked a couple questions related to the vision. And to recap our conversation from Board Retreat 1, something that we talked about and was proposed by a few members was changing the current vision to include this end for our students. And so what we wanted to do was go out to the community and get input for what they thought about that potential revision. And we're about to share those results with you, but wanted to serve, good morning, a quick reminder for our discussion from Board Retreat 1. And so we asked the question, if I go back to it, we asked this question in the survey and we had people rank from 1 to 5. Does this refreshed vision, do you believe that this is the refreshed vision that we should use? And here's the data we received. A little bit more split when it came to this question than the mission question that we shared earlier. Yes.
I think that, and I wrote that down too, what is a world-class school system? Because I think that is one of the main things that I hear a lot. What does that mean?
Yeah, and we actually have a question jumping into that where we ask folks, what do they think it means?
Right.
Which we're gonna share very shortly. But yes, that was the other theme. We added this for our students. And then the other pillar of our discussion was, what does world-class mean? So we do have a data point that we'll share with you shortly. So given that we had a little bit more variance with this question, we wanted to dive a little deeper and just pull out some broad themes that Justin, Lauren, and I found within the data. And so some of those themes you can see here. So this is in response to, if you scored this lower than a 3, provide some rationale. So here was some of the rationale and just a theme that we saw throughout. So I'll let everybody just take a look at what some community members mentioned in terms of the refreshed vision. And like I said, board team, we are going to jump into that protocol and that discussion shortly. So if you want to jot down anything on Post-it, thing you want to discuss further, feel free to do that before we move to our next piece here. So that was based on the vision, and the other pillar that we talked about in terms of the vision was world-class. So we mentioned, what does world-class mean for Lee County? And so we proposed some definitions and tried to get some input through some conversations. And so we asked this question: if a definition of world-class were included in the district's refreshed vision, which definition best represents what we are hoping to achieve? And there was a considerable vote for, as you can see, the definition of being of the highest degree of excellence. And so something to consider for any proposals, minor changes, rewrites, that we did have a good amount of folks lean heavily into this definition. So with that, we want to open up this space to think about the mission and vision, like we said, through these 3 different lenses. So taking into consideration the community's input, the data we shared, and if you want to take a look at it in more detail, we have it here for you. We want to give you the space to just process. Through all that information, through our conversation through Board Retreat 1, what do we want to propose for mission and vision? Is it keep as is, so all looks good with the current mission and vision, and we feel comfortable that that represents what we want to have moving forward? Are those minor changes? Do we want to propose any minor changes, including the ones that we already talked about, maybe something different, maybe an edit based on the information we talked about today? Or do we want to propose and discuss a rewrite? So what we're going to have you all do is take a few moments just to consider how you want to approach the conversation and discussion. And we have Post-its at the table, so if you want to jot down any notes, feel free to grab them. And we are going to spend a few minutes just independently processing, then we'll open up some discussion. We also have over here a visual anchor for your part. So similar to our last meeting, we want to make sure that we're archiving our thoughts, our ideas, and keeping them here That way, Justin and I can use these for anything moving forward, and also our conversations with Cabinet or Dr. B. We have that as evidence. So as you're writing anything on a Post-it, in a few moments, we're gonna ask you to stand up, place your Post-it either in the keep as is. So if you're posting anything there, maybe some quick rationale for why you believe the current mission and vision aligns to what Lee County needs. Any minor changes, what those are will go here. And then if you're proposing a rewrite, just specifically name what that rewrite will be. Once we get those thoughts, we'll go ahead and post them, and then we'll just hold a quick conversation and open up the floor.
Good morning. Good.
Good morning.
And let me know if any data you want on the screen as you're considering, or any of those slides.
Let's see the data. Can you go back to the definition of world class then, just like graphic real quick?
I was gonna say.
Got it. That's all I need.
Yeah.
So Dr. B and board team, as the spirit moves you, and if you have your thoughts gathered, we'll ask you to just head over to the visual anchor that we have. Go ahead and just mark your Post-its through these 3 lenses like we mentioned, and then we'll head back to our seats to open up the discussion.
Oh, I wish they put that slide back.
Looks like we've had mostly everyone add in thoughts to our visual anchor. So we want to open up the floor and just consider, one, does anyone want to share anything that was written? Anything through the lenses of keep as is, minor changes, or a rewrite? And then I'll most likely ask Justin any themes that are being drawn out from the poster board over there, just so we can recognize any themes about the board. Yep.
This world-class not being defined still bothers me a little bit. I'd rather just somehow put maybe the highest level or something. I mean, what's the definition up there? So people know that that's what we're striving for, is to give the very best, either best, highest level, or something like that.
So I like world class, but I'm struggling to come up with what Chris talked about in our last meeting, which was that custodian at NASA who said, when asked, what are you doing here? I'm working to put a man on the moon. I'm struggling to find a way that we can come up with the same phrase for world class. There's got to be, and I was hoping you were gonna put that up there.
Well, what I said, may I jump in?
Yeah.
What I said was, we need to make sure that everyone knows what the mission and vision are, and we need to make sure that everyone is working, their daily work is focused on achieving it.
Right,
Their
right.
daily work is tied to it. I think that's a cultural issue as opposed to a definitional or a word issue.
But what I'm getting at is the vision, we need to define world class, and it needs to be in a way that anybody can say what world class is, because I don't think there's anything wrong with world class. I mean, basically, we're an educational community that wants to compete worldwide, whether you're talking about students, staff, whatever. So, anyway,
But that goes back to including everybody then,
yeah, yeah.
right? Which I think a lot of us put that in there.
A number of board members shared, pushing on what you're pushing on as well, which is like, what do we mean by world class? Either achieve the highest degree of excellence, right, or change world class to highest level, or being of the highest degree of excellence, but it seems like there's a desire for more clarity there. The second theme that's emerging, a couple people talked about this, is including, kind of expanding who's included. So this world class system, who's it for? Is it just for students? Is it for students in the workforce? So thinking beyond that. So I think like that's on us, right, to kind of give you a couple of options potentially, right? But it seems pretty clear that defining world class is critical. We don't have anybody rewrite, right? So we do some, yeah.
What I was going to say too, just what Kathleen had said, regarding Chris's comment the last time about the janitor. This is the same thing. If we even look at our own people, like James, for instance, he is this, he tries to make sure that everything he does, excuse me, for Franklin Park is at the highest level. So he is a perfect example of what this is. And that's inclusive.
So how would he say it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's the question
Maybe
I
we
was
should ask
thinking
him.
about.
Call him.
If we called
Ask
James,
him.
what would he say he's doing on a daily basis and why? He would not say he's putting a person on the moon,
No, he would not. Maybe.
but he's doing some of that very difficult work.
I think when you stop it at system, it includes everything. Is the way I look at it. That's why I don't like adding for students or anything else. I mean, that takes from the lowest staff to the highest staff to every student to.
Because it takes all of us.
And parents, everything else. I mean, everything that's involved in that.
So by way of using the word system, we're including different people.
That's the way I see it anyway.
Understood, but all those people are collectively in service of the students. Okay. We're gonna say that?
I don't want to complicate matters, but I don't think the vision and mission exist independently of each other.
Right.
And I would think that, I'm trying to answer your question, I can't speak for James, but I would think James might say, I'm helping people reach their fullest potential. by organizing the move and moving Franklin Park from one side of the community to the other and making sure eventually we had everything those students need to continue to learn there during this temporary placement, he created an environment where children could reach their fullest potential.
Yeah, and Dr. B, I was just gonna reference this slide too, in terms of where we're grounding this conversation. That hits on the mission, why our organization exists, versus the vision is the future we're hoping to create. So I think that point accents the slides really well.
So, go ahead, Sam.
One of the things, and I had talked over this, kind of what Mr. Person said, I had one up there that said basically don't get too detailed, because then I think it will take away from what we can do with our values and that thing. So I was kind of look at some of the responses just on the slides from the data, and I felt like, kind of like what you had said, it's gonna, it already includes what it does. If we go too much that way, then we're gonna restrict things.
And you'll narrow it potentially. Yeah. And there is alignment from the survey feedback that people are very much on board with the mission.
Back to James, he's meeting everyone's need. And everyone's need might be different, but he's meeting everyone's need. So, that's what I thought of when y'all were speaking. I'm thinking, every day he's meeting someone's need, and it may be individually, it may be a classroom, it may be the whole school, but it's a need, and he completes it by the end of the day.
That's his mission. Not his vision. So,
I was talking to, first of all, 24 responses doesn't move me. I'm sorry, but in a district of 800,000 people, 24 responses doesn't move me. I mean, I think it's a good starting point, but it's not informative to me in terms of decision-making. I was talking to a community leader who said, we've had a strategic plan for a long time, and the vision has always been the same, and world-class is the key to that vision. And taking world-class away is too disruptive for the community to be able to wrap their mind around it. So I'll come back to, what does world-class mean? I think that's our job. I think that's the superintendent's job. I think that's staff's job, to make sure that everybody that works for them knows what world-class means, and it drives their work every day. It has to become part of who we are. I think in my interview with you, I said, I don't know what the vision means.
Yeah.
And as long as we know what the vision means, I'm not sure the words up there matter as much as
The action.
what we do with it that matters.
Can we be unified in articulating what this means for Lee County?
Well, and behaving and acting
Correct.
that way, right? And one idea that we were thinking, what we were considering is, really, if we left the vision, leave the mission as is, leave the vision, the slight amendment would be for our students, and then just having underneath a single phrase to explain what we mean by world-class. The other thing that I would offer too is living the values and embodying them is the values you have, right? Number one. And then number two, they can help to bring the vision to life. That's not to say that living the values helps you to achieve the priorities and the objectives. I'm not saying that. It's just the way that you're approaching the work is a part of conducting yourself in a world-class manner. Right? If we consider, which we're going to get into in a couple moments, but I would offer that too, right? If you think about what some of those values are, what it looks like to live them, which actually is a discussion that we want to have with you, is what does it look like to embody the values? So kind of what I'm hearing though is we still want to define what do we mean by world class, and it's not just in words, it's also in action, which I think we can partially do by thinking about the values. That's one way, but if there's other ways that any of you are thinking about, please share. How are we feeling about including for our students and focusing on students?
We're bigger than that.
That came up last time.
It has to be more than
Has to be
our
more.
students, I think. That's my opinion.
Okay. I just want to revisit that and just make sure, because Chairman Persons, you offered system, it incorporates all, right? So by way of that, seeing some nods around that. Okay.
Yeah, so it sounds like the theme is continue to focus in on world-class that'll be a next step.
Okay.
And in terms of for our students, we would turn back to the current vision to make sure we're encompassing all community members, all stakeholders in Lee County. Does that feel right? And I want to open up the floor one more time before we pivot to our next part.
I understand what Mr. Persons is saying. The word system includes the body that is making this happen day in and day out. The teachers, the staff, the educators, the people in our room, the word system. But why are we all here? We're all here for the students of Lee County and the future of what our community is, like what we are putting out into the community once they leave here to be successful in anything they choose to do. So I'm not opposed to adding 4 students. For me, that's why I'm here. But the word system, in my mind, when I read a world-class system, that means it takes all of us to make that happen for our students. So maybe it's just the perspective I'm seeing at.
And I agree with you. That's why represented to my left and to your right are not just academic services. You have
Right.
IT, you have operations, you have transportation, you have all the avenues, because if we can't get the kids to school on time, right, we impact them reaching their highest potential. If we can't get their building and their learning environment right, we impact. So I do like the word system from the aspect of it takes an entire system to get students to reach their highest potential. But I also like, and I wrote it up on my Post-it note, that I was struggling with world-class till and that's why I asked you to go back to that one slide. World-class means the best in the world. That's a vision I can carry to a cabinet. It's pretty high standard. We may fall short of it occasionally, or more often than not, but setting that sort of exceed expectation, that we're not comparing ourselves just to the top 10 in the state, we're not just comparing ourselves to the top 100 in the country, we're looking worldwide to say, these are things that we're going to do better than other systems. It's a pretty lofty vision, and then it gets grounded in so when you're shooting for world class, does it help every student reach his or her highest potential? I came into this with a very different thought for the retreat, and I'm leaving with a very different thought than I came in with.
I'm kind of, as I said, I have both I have one in each category up there, which is kind of hilarious. You know, for me, you know, I get the system. For me, it's the students, but I keep thinking about what Ms. Patrica said about, you know, the mission, you know, put man on the moon. Ours is students being successful. So I kind of equate it that way. That's how I'm looking at what our mission is in that statement. But I mean,
We already have a
What I'd like to
Well,
be able
I
to
meant-
do is walk into
my
a transportation yard, walk into a classroom, walk into a cafeteria, and ask people, what are you doing today? And I'd like them to respond with, I'm doing something that will help our students reach their highest potential. That you know, if we get good quality food and we feed them on time and they go out of the cafeteria feeling full, they're ready to learn,
Yep.
right? If I'm a bus driver, by getting kids to school on time and being the first person who opens the door and greets them and smiles at them and welcomes them to the educational process for Tuesday morning this morning, they're helping them reach their highest potential. That would be fun to drive.
So then this is a world-class culture.
Well,
Who we
by
are.
helping our kids reach their
Yeah,
fullest potential,
totally.
we have to be world-class. We have to figure out better ways to do systems-wide, do those things. I'll be quiet, sorry, too much.
The mission's basically the day-to-day operation. You know, the vision is where we want to get to in the future. We're striving all the time to get there. It may be something, I mean, the odds are we may not end up being the very best in the whole world. Okay, but that's where we're striving.
Sure.
You know, but the mission is the one that has the students in it, everybody, and that brings everybody together from the janitor to the, you know, superintendent.
I appreciate that point too, because even if, I mean, world-class is a vision, that's why it's at the vision level, right? Now, the daily work, ensuring each student achieves his or her highest potential, that is uncompromising. So no matter what, while you might be in pursuit of the world-class school system, it does not change no matter what your role is, like Dr. Bernier, like walking into the transportation yard or into a cafeteria or into a classroom or into, you know, any of the offices or meetings of the cabinet members here. That should be palpable, right, and clear. And so we did consider and discuss adding students for our students to world-class school system, but the conversation also is exposing, we have students. The day-to-day work is focused on students
Right.
and their achievement, and not just their achievement, it's their personal potential, which extends beyond the classroom, right, ideally, right, into their career, into adulthood, right, into whatever their life path becomes.
And as, I think, to the point, and just to echo that, students is encapsulated in mission. So I think I'm hearing that as a theme, and making sure that in this mission, why we're here, students is at the forefront. And to Justin's point, it lives here. I think as some next steps and to connect what we're about to jump into is I want to in the next few moments, pivot us to values, but maintaining that there is a clear connection, and I'll go back to our pyramid scheme here. There's a clear connection from where we are starting in this conversation to where we're about to go with values. And making sure that, for instance, if we're talking about world class, well, two values I see that I already see a connection, which we can discuss, is excellence and high expectations. So connecting that to world class and making sure there's a clear through line is something that I think we should keep at the forefront as we jump into the conversation about values. Justin and I have some clear themes and some clear next steps that we'll jump into after our conversation today. And like we said, all of this is just ideas. All of this is draft form. Anything that is an actual proposal will go through the formal board approval process, and you will be able to see any changes that are being proposed. And what we'll do is after our session, just make sure that there is something clear for you to react to if any changes are going to be made. Before we jump into our next session, just want to open up one more time. Any final thoughts about mission and vision, and then we're going to jump ahead to talking about values. So for values, there is a direct connection, and we like to just work our way down the pyramid. We did discuss values during Board Retreat 1. So if you remember, we did the bullseye activity, we had a conversation about it. So we wanted to bring in the values through a new lens. And so same thing, we used the survey to just gather some data and just spark some conversations today. And then what we're going to really focus in on is analyzing the data, but then also brainstorming, what do these values actually look like in action? And so we'll have a chance for you all to brainstorm that, discuss, and then one point to note is just continuing to find that through line between our mission and vision and our 6 values, which we're about to jump into. And so as a quick reminder, just to orient everyone, 6 values up on the screen: excellence, integrity, high expectations, accountability, belief in students, and professionalism. And one thing we noted from retreat number 1 is there wasn't a strong proposal to change any of these or add anything or take things away. It was more, what does this mean in action? And so we'll talk about that here in a moment. And then how is this connected to mission and vision, and then priorities as well, and making sure it lives throughout our strategic plan. In terms of our data analysis, we asked folks who took the survey a quick question about values, and you can see that question here at the top. To what extent does SDLC embody this value? And so just once again, in terms of noting the impact of the survey here, this is a broad range of folks who took this survey, but it does provide some interesting data, and we wanted to share this with you all. So the scale was 1 through 5. 5 was the highest you could mark, 1 was lowest, and you can just see the breakdown of results here. And I'll give everyone a moment just to take in this slide and just jot down any notes or anything interesting you might find from the visual. To quickly align
Oh, can you go back to the data for a second? Something that I'll point out, and you can see this if you look at the auxiliary data pack, we're gonna get into the priorities in a little bit. But belief in students
It's the lowest number.
is the lowest one, right? What was, and I know it was like a 24 response count to the survey. But providing engaging instruction was ranked very high on the survey, no matter what group we were talking about. And what I would add also is that in the actual DAC meetings, we broke the groups into three, elementary, middle, high school, and providing engaging instruction came to the top three in I believe every group. So just to kind of point out that there's, understandably so, right? These are people that support, right, and represent schools and are advocating for schools, right? And so of course, instruction, high quality teaching and learning is top of mind. But so perhaps that's obvious, but I just wanted to point that out because that is not represented on this slide. But it jumped out to me that that's the lowest one. That also was very consistent in what people were asking for in the DAC meetings and also in the survey, which we'll look at shortly.
Yes, thanks for pointing that out. And like we said, if you want to access this slide along with those DAC Jam boards, which has some more insight into what those team members mentioned, that's up here. So feel free to access that as well. Want to just open up space. We can just do table partners since we have a group of 8. So I'll go back to this slide, but where do you see alignment in experiences and where do you potentially see gaps? And trying to connect our conversation from Board Retreat 1, if you remember our bullseye activity, where do you see alignment and where do you potentially see some interesting data points that we want to potentially discuss as a whole group? We'll first start out in just table partners, then we'll jump into a quick discussion.
My shoulder partner, how are you?
I don't understand.
Yeah, but the part, I'm wondering.
I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, I don't either.
Alignment of experience.
Can you give me an example?
This group here,
Huge
our conversation from Board Retreat 1,
Make your
where did we,
pie up
I know.
when we discussed belief in
to 5
students,
pieces and all
was
of
this
them.
aligned, was it our lowest value? Or was it not? Was it our highest? Was it middle of the pack?
I can't remember.
I have no recollection.
No recollection?
I don't even
Fair
remember
enough.
having a conversation.
No.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll just open up the conversation for any questions then about these data points. Anything we want to draw out, any points we want to make about the data we're sharing.
So in the first session, the thing that stuck out was the fact that students felt that students weren't engaged by the instruction taking place. And I'm not sure whether I'm making this up, but I think there was some frustration on the part of educators about the impact that they were having. And that would translate into students saying, people don't believe in me because they're not meeting my needs as a student. And it would translate into staff not believing in students, therefore not meeting the needs of individual students because they didn't believe in student competency. That's, I'm just, there you go.
Wasn't it the younger kids believed that they were getting what they needed, but the older kids
Correct.
didn't
High school, there was
Secondary.
a total
believe that
disconnect.
they were
Yeah.
receiving what they needed, they were
Yeah.
bored or something.
They weren't
There
excited,
was definitely misalignment at each level.
Right.
The older you got,
the less excited.
the more confluence there was, the more incongruent responses between teachers, staff, and students.
Which
The
makes
students
sense.
being largely engaged.
How they thought.
I'm gonna offer something about belief in students. I wonder if the idea of individualized instruction, so when I think belief in students without that definition, I believe all students can learn, I believe we can impact every student that we have, but when you operationalize a definition of individualized instruction, if that's what you ask me to determine, I know we're not individualizing for each learner. So we're not. I mean, and I think we may be, so I think that if somebody really read the operationalized definition of belief in students, I could see why it came out at the bottom. If you just talk to a teacher and ask them the question, do you believe that every student in your room can reach their highest potential and you can make them a contributing member to society, you might have gotten a different response. I think this is I throw that out there as a way to continue the discussion.
Yeah, and isn't meeting social and emotional needs contrary to what the state is allowing us to do right now? Don't we have baked into our values something that the state has taken away from us as an initiative? Thought social and emotional learning was not allowed anymore.
I think you can still work with some social and emotional learning. I know my attorney sat way in the back. Sorry, Kathy. I think we have to be careful to make sure that when we go down those paths or we help people, that we're making sure that we're informing parents and using our parents to help us guide how we support a student when they enter crisis. Because all kids are on a continuum. All adults are on continuum. Sometimes we feel really at the upper end, we're totally in control of our lives, even though we may not be. We feel like we have a handle on everything. We could lose a parent, we could lose a child, we could have a car accident, a mortgage we could lose a job. And every high-performing person can slide down a continuum. Our kids do the same things. And I believe we still respond to them. We may not use those terms, but we're still responding to them.
We have like a death in the school, we bring counselors in type things. I mean, it's still done, it's just, there's certain areas that it's not done now.
Heck, just the letters that we just read yesterday,
That's a good
right
one.
there.
I'm just looking at it and saying, think of a pie cut in 5 pieces, and if I cut 3 and 6, 6, 7, and a 3, 3, 3 size out of 5, they're gonna look very close. I mean, otherwise, it's not a huge difference.
Yeah.
In all of those.
Not like one of
I mean, if one was a 2 and another was a 4 something, or high 4, I mean, that would be a big difference. But to me, I think I'd say they're all pretty even.
Yeah, that's a good point. You want to add one more piece?
I would agree with the chair, but for me, when I was looking at these numbers initially, I read them the way they were written out. I did not look at it that way, Armor, but I looked at it as a baseline set for us as we define what does it look like. When we refresh this and we look at these numbers again, say a year from now, and we report out to the board, have we gone from 3.6 to 4s? Have we gone from a 4 to a 4.2? And to Ms. Patrica's point, have we surveyed more than 24 people?
Yeah.
And one other point that we'll add, because I think Dr. B, we're teeing up the next part here, which we're going to talk about what do these values look like. In terms of belief in students, we spoke mainly through the lens of an instructor or an educator, someone in the classroom. But considering on the cabinet team or a principal team, what is belief in students? Does this align not only to an educator in the classroom, but also is individualized instruction? That's something that at every level, that is our definition for belief in students. And that's a value that all of us can uphold. So considering that, as we do know, this was the lowest, not by a lot, but something to think about too.
I see belief in students and high expectations as the same thing. My belief in students is that they can achieve their highest personal potential.
Exactly.
And I have high expectations about what their personal potential is. So to me, they're the same thing.
But what Dr. Bernier's talking about is operationalizing that belief, and that's what's coming out in the survey.
Yeah, and I take high expectations to another level because it does speak to employees too.
Yep.
I think belief in students is about a belief in students, but I think when it comes to high expectations, yes, we have high expectations for our students, but we also have high expectations for our employees and our community partners who partner with us and our foundation and all those individuals.
Yeah, and we want all of our employees, all of our community members to be able to embody these values in some form. Now, it's going to look different depending on who you are, your position, and your relationship with the district, but keeping that in mind as we're about to pivot to what does this look like, really trying to get specific for how can a principal embody these values? How can a cabinet team member embody these values? How can we embody these values as leaders of the district? And so what we're gonna jump into that process now. And that's gonna be our culminating activity for values. But if there's any other notes or thoughts you want to gather in terms of values, you can feel free to capture them as well using Post-its. But what we're going to have you do is focus on what does this value look like? And we have an example here in terms of a core value of student-centered. So you can use this as kind of a starting point. But what we really want you to consider is a few different lenses. And so as you're jotting down ideas of what does this look like, over here we have the 6 values, same thing, with a visual anchor next to our mission and vision. And so you can see all 6 broken down. And in terms of some lenses that you can consider, one is starting with this team here, this core team, the 8 of us. How can we embody these values? What does it look like on this team? So you can start there. If you want, you can also consider cabinet team members. How can those values live on that team with Dr. B as well? You can think school teams, you can think educators, parents, families. It's really up to you in terms of how you want to think, what lens you want to add thoughts in here. And if you want, you can add all different lenses. What we're going to have us do is take a few moments, same process as before, gathering thoughts, gathering ideas, and adding those ideas to our anchor charts here. Then feel free, as you're posting those Post-its up there, to just take a look at what other people are writing, maybe jot down a note, something you want to discuss further. We'll open up discussion for the group, any questions, and that'll close out our values section for the day. Before I give you all the space to jot down some notes, add them to our visual anchors, any questions about the process to close out our values section? Keep this up here for now, just so you have an anchor of the values, definitions, and then the data if you want to use that in your responses.
So core value, and what are the 2 questions I'm answering?
2 questions you're answering are, it's actually just one. What does it look like in action? Or how can different people,
The last slide. What does it mean? What does it look like? Okay.
Your survey you did, that was through the lens really of a teacher, or like you said, an educator?
I'll go back.
Or were they trying to look through the lens of the,
That's a great question. I'll go back to who took the survey.
It was just broad.
Yeah.
okay,
It wasn't specific to any.
all right, just wondering.
Yeah, and these are the folks who took the survey too. So it was mostly, as you can see, DAC advisory council members, CSI members, which some were teachers, but
Right,
not everyone.
I got you.
So 24 response, if you consider all the members, that's not 24 people. It's 24 response as a whole, because that is a large group. These are larger groups.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so it's not 24 individual people.
No, it was,
Because they're
just across the
groups,
3 groups.
But yeah, we sent it to these, so it's
Those are all the people that responded.
Yeah, it's all the
Yeah.
groups.
total, yeah.
You know, Of all those DAC members, only 20, not 24 of DAC, only 24 of these
Right.
people
Looks like
responded.
it's one EDAC member, one.
Yeah, that's the purple color.
They had more opportunity, but
I would say at the DAC meeting that we facilitated, it was, I have to check the specific count, but it was
it's a big committee.
much
That's a,
more.
that's,
Yeah, we had a large group.
huge.
Oops, I did something wrong.
My brain cells are very slow today.
Take another couple moments. If you want to add anything to our visual anchors, feel free. We'll draw out some themes, and then we'll close our value section for today.
Actually,
It'd be hard to give out this survey again in the future,
It would be hard to.
because hopefully there would be more than 24
Oh, yeah, yeah,
participants. So now you're taking two. They're not apples and apples anymore.
Right.
So if you can get more participants than let's say 100, how can you
Yeah.
compare that
Not
to
again.
this?
Right.
I'm getting
Well,
too
not only that,
specific or
but
too
like
broad,
that-
so I'm gonna go back.
Staff gave so much feedback in the breakout group, and it was kind of presented to them like, if there's anything more you want to say, here's this survey. So I think a lot of people felt like they said what they had to say and didn't take the survey, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we had a lot of input on those jam boards.
Yeah, that was-
That we not only are using here, but in anything further.
Yeah, I thought
is gonna
Jack
be
was
leveraged.
great.
They were.
I thought they
amazing.
really provide, and there were themes, there was very, jar is huge.
We ran out of time, like, we could have gone till.
Yeah.
So is that 24 people, or is that, because there's so many of us?
Well, but Jack didn't, a lot of people felt like they gave the feedback they needed to during the breakout session in the jam board, so then they didn't do the survey.
Okay, but they did
Oh, yes, the feedback
Okay,
was there.
share, okay.
Going back and watching that DEC meeting and those breakout sessions, I probably should have suggested it to the board because they were really engaged. They really did a good job. I thought they did a good job.
That was, last one.
Correct.
We're gonna have any interaction?
Limited. The goal is for them really to watch your work, so that they're not taking my perception and vision of what occurred.
Okay.
They'll get a chance, well, I'm gonna encourage them, when we get it,
We are gonna come back in about a minute to close up
I
this
would be good to
section.
hear what they have to say.
And then we will go on a break.
I kinda wanted to, I get it.
Think so?
Yeah, no, I'd like to, but.
So it looks like everyone has added thoughts, and thank you for doing that. Thank you for your input. And as I'm taking a look, and I know some of you as well, took a look at what's up there, some really strong insight for what this can look like and what these values can look like across the district. Justin, Lauren, and I are gonna work to take that information, group it, affinity group, come up, draw out some themes, and propose those themes or any other insight that we have in that readout report upcoming. Want to add one more piece?
Yeah, just what I would offer too, in some cases, what we've done when refreshing plans or creating strategic plans is offer just like an insert within the plan. Not everybody does this, we're gonna include it as an example and everybody can provide feedback and say like, yes, this works, no, this doesn't work. But sometimes we'll launch a plan and people are like, great, you have the values, like what does this mean? What does it look like? And sometimes characterizing them and describing what they look like in action helps people as a jumping off point. Sometimes leaders will use it, almost have like a one-pager or like a cheat sheet, if you will, and say like, okay, if I'm walking a building, it's a way I can recognize, when I understand that already happens to some extent. So just understand like there's a number of ways that we've picked up on input like this to help people take action on the values and not just have them live within a PDF or within a document. And so we'll propose a few ways to do that, but just know that that's part of our thinking.
We are gonna head on a 10-minute break. Anyone wanna add any other pieces, thoughts, Dr. B, before we head on the break?
No, but I want to encourage our cabinet members that are here on a break. I think the board is interested in having some interaction with you. This is an opportunity not to just stay in your world, but to get up. Also, come and look at the notes, because you can't see, we're not actually reviewing everything we covered and everything we wrote. Please take the opportunity to come up and see what they're doing, see what they're writing about mission and vision, and what they're sharing with us as to what it looks like related to our values.
One other logistical, and thank you, Dr. B, for naming that. We encourage anyone, walk around the room throughout our break. We'll come back at 10:32 to jump into priorities. And I want to make a quick note, not sure if this was mentioned, lunch will be at 12, and we have being delivered, it'll be set up out here. But just so you know, lunch will be delivered at 12 after our next section. We'll see you all at 10:32.
why.
A real estate investor.
The time is 10:39, and we will resume our meeting.
All right. Hope everyone had a nice break, got recharged. We are going to switch gears. So we're moving away from strategic direction, mission, vision, values. We are getting into priorities, revisiting them, defining them, discussing them through a few different lenses. The hope, and potentially consolidating from an initial draft list. This is really where it's going to set us up to have conversations about objectives as well, and begin to define those objectives, which of course will be picked up by the cabinet and further defined. I promise this is my last tangential piece of content and questions, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you were going to build a bridge, what would be your top priorities?
Safety?
Yeah, just call it out, safety.
Safety.
Yeah, great.
Foundation.
Foundation, okay, strong foundation. Other ideas?
Purpose.
A purpose, you have a purpose for the bridge, good.
Aesthetics.
How does it look? Yeah, aesthetics. Any other ideas?
Cost.
Cost. Okay, right? Got to be reasonable. So I'm going to tell a very short story about this bridge. Has anybody heard of this bridge?
Just now.
2 of you have. Go figure. Okay. So this is the new Choluteca Bridge in Honduras. It was originally built in the 1930s. And the government there and the municipality wanted to strengthen the bridge to make it more reliable when hurricanes came, because that is a hurricane-prone area. And so they commissioned this Japanese firm. They spent a lot of money on it, right, to rebuild the bridge and extend right across the river and go from one side to the other so that people could go across. Aesthetically, nice. It's a suspension bridge, I think. Actually, you can check my thinking because I have the different types of bridges on the next slide. So we talked about a number of these things, right? We talked about purpose, safety. I don't have budget on there, so note to self, right? And so because of those things, they consider like, okay, what type of bridge are we going to build, or what are we going to strengthen given the type of bridge that it is, the purpose that it has, etc. They did think about the environment. Something they didn't think about as much was adaptability, and actually the environment as well, and what the implications of that might be. So what happened was in 1998, Hurricane Mitch hit, and it hit this area, and you can see, right, it looks very different. It's very different. Parts of the bridge were destroyed, but the core of the bridge, it was I believe it was a Category 5 hurricane. It devastated much of the area, unfortunately. The bridge was still standing. And it largely was unscathed, except for some of the suspension parts, right? But it was rendered useless. The reason why is because what the hurricane did, because of the force of nature and how powerful it was fundamentally change the location of the river. So essentially having a bridge that led to nowhere and didn't connect anything, right? So despite the engineering that went into it, right, it was built within the budget. It did withstand the hurricane. It remained useless, right? And so I'm sharing this with you because that is obviously not what we want, right? Like we're getting into priority setting, okay? We want our priorities to be as future-proof as they can be, right? As clear and providing direction as we're able to give them. But despite any conditions, and we know that those are many that change, the priorities hold up. Perhaps objectives would change, or our initiatives or actions, but not our priorities, okay? And so by priorities, what I mean is really these broad focus areas that give us strategic direction. And under those live the objectives, and under those live actions, right, and initiatives. Priorities are different from objectives because priorities themselves are not measurable, but they certainly consist of a number of measurable components, the objectives, right? And initiatives and actions, more granular, right? This gets into living our mission, essentially, right? These are the initiatives, these are the things that we're doing on the day-to-day, right? Making progress against these actions, making progress against these initiatives. And there's some examples there. So for example, a priority might be ensuring all students graduate college and career ready, pretty broad, there's a number of objectives that we could put underneath that, right? For example, objective, right? 95% of students graduate with a standard high school diploma by 2024. Just examples, okay? Priorities, I already mentioned this, but they're not meant to be measurable, but we do want them to be clear and flexible. They do express or imply some sort of action or outcome, but they leave space, right? And they're not too narrow, right? They're not prescriptive. They're not telling a team or a person how to do something, okay? They're more strategic in that sense. And we have a number of examples that we're gonna refer to as we consolidate our list and look at a couple different data points. Okay. I'm going to show you in a moment the initial set of 7 priority areas that we got feedback on at the DAC night, we got feedback on through the survey, right? All of the priority areas were informed by the data we looked at last time, right, which were different district performance data, the Cognia survey data, which actually we're going to revisit momentarily, specifically where there's alignment and dissonance between students and educators. And the other data set was the interviews. Right, so from that and synthesizing and reflecting on retreat number 1, that's what led us to essentially these 7 draft priorities, right, which are in alphabetical order here. Right, so ensuring equitable learning environments, improving our internal operating systems, preparing students for life after graduation, providing engaging classroom instruction, retaining highly qualified teachers, strengthening community partnerships, and supporting and developing leaders. Okay. We also, same list, just some high-level definitions. Okay. Now, my ask and what we want to do and accomplish between now and lunch and into the afternoon, if we need to, is really ask ourselves: are these the right 7? Are these the definitions that we want? Might we collapse or amend any of these? And then what does success look like? And that success question is critical because that's going to set us up for the conversation about objectives and support the cabinet in doing that same exercise. Okay? Any questions or initial reactions before we actually look at some data from students and educators? Okay. All right. And we're gonna do a few protocols to really dig into these definitions and think about them and talk about them. Okay. All right. This is in your, I know this is a little bit small. Let me orient you to what you're looking at. So before we get into a deeper discussion about priorities, I want to elevate the student voice for a moment here, okay? What you're looking at is, this is both in the data, the auxiliary data handout, it's in our session slides as well. What you're looking at is an analysis, essentially, of the Cognia survey data. So if you recall, there was about, I don't remember the exact number, but close to 30,000 students who had responded. I don't remember the exact number of educators, but I can check that for you in a moment. Dr. Savage took all of the raw data, essentially. And what we looked at, and this is a conversation that we had last time, if you remember, we're like, okay, there's clearly some, maybe a little bit of alignment between educators and students, but there seems to be a lack of alignment. But where does that live, right? Like which levels, okay? And that data is available like down to the school level, just so you know, but we don't have that in here, but that does exist and it is available. So what you're looking at here is 2 things. So I'm gonna show you high school, middle school, elementary. The top section of each of the slides is going to be where there's the best alignment. So where are students and teachers responding similarly? And in high school, safety, right? So high school students feel like, okay, teachers are looking out for us, they're trying to keep us safe. But when you see a difference, this means that on average, the students rank that lower on that 1 to 5 scale. So students felt lower. So any negatives are students ranking lower, teachers ranking higher, okay? Where you see the least alignment. And these are like questions, so not identical, but very similar. So you have the teacher question on my right side, right? Student question on my left side. So deliver instruction that considers learners' needs, interests, and potential. Lessons that were changed to meet my needs. Difference, right? Similar, right? Opportunities for learners to share their opinions about their learning experiences, opportunities to give adults my opinions about learning activities, my opinions, okay? Difference. So again, this is what students are saying. The perception, right, of educators. I am doing this. I am providing opportunities, right? Versus what students are reporting. This is just a data point. Now, of course, there's observation, right? There's other ways to understand this. But I thought it was important for us to come back to this data because we said we would last time and because we're about to head into priorities, okay? Finally, lessons that were changed to meet my needs. Biggest gap between students and teachers, right? Biggest gap. And actually, we were kind of talking around it and like, I think I remember this way. I thought, you're remembering correctly. You're remembering correctly, right? So this brings it more concrete. Okay, so that's high school. Middle school, similar, safety. Similar, safety, right? Similar. Middle school and secondary level. Considering learners' needs, interests, and potential, lessons that were changed meet my needs. So we're talking about middle school learners. Opportunity to share opinions, right? Opportunities to give adults my opinions. Difference 1, 3, 4. Again, on 1 to 5 scales, that's pretty significant across, especially if we consider the number of responses, right? And then finally, aligned opportunities learners aligned to their needs. For learners that aligns to their needs, lessons were changed with my needs. Again, 1.5. So know that that's there, right? What's interesting about this too is if you consider relationships between teachers and students, like understanding, looking at data, right? And understanding what students' needs are. How do we go about that, right? Finally, with elementary. Elementary students feel safe. That's very aligned with their teachers. Keep our learners' well-being as a priority in everything we do. Show that they care about us. Very, very close alignment. Almost identical, right? So the elementary students feel cared for and seen, right, and safe. Wonderful. Know and perform our jobs well. Know and do their work well. Elementary students, yes, they absolutely validate that. There's a lot of alignment, right? These students feel cared for, and they feel that their teachers are working for them, right? As a father of a 5-year-old and 8-year-old, you know, and some of you may have, maybe, you know, your children are grown, or you still have young children, right? In the cabinet as well. We know that even though they might be young, that does not mean they are unreliable, right, in their reporting. Okay, but again, this is a data point for us to consider. So elementary, right, but there's consistency. If you see the same differences are consistent, now the numbers are not the same, right? So elementary students feel that lessons are changed to meet their needs to a higher degree than middle or high school, but these same 3 groupings of questions are consistent across all 3 levels. It didn't need to be that way, it's just that's how the data played out, right, when we're segregating it. So I just want to open it up for a minute. I know I'm sharing this data with you for the first time. We saw high level that this trend existed, so now we're drilling into it a little bit more deeply. And again, and perhaps the cabinet would be particularly interested to know that like it is available at the school level, right, and then you know, there's other ways that we can look at it as well. But I am curious to hear from the board, Dr. Bernier, any reflections. You don't have to, but I just want to open up the space. We're going to have plenty of time to talk when we get into the priorities and the nitty-gritty of our priority areas. But I do want to give you a moment to think and respond.
I think it's really interesting, I mean, how sort of consistent it is from high school all the way down to elementary school, what they felt was good and not so good.
Yeah.
I wonder to what extent the state standards and directives with respect to curriculum impact this. You know, there's a certain amount of autonomy that educators have, but I don't know to what extent the state requirements impact
Right.
this data.
Right. Or how as a teacher I understand,
Right.
it might be like, oh, actually I have more flexibility, but I don't know that to be true.
Right.
Right, but just you're wondering about that.
Yeah.
Understood. Yes.
So to put this in kids' language, the conversation I hear around my dinner table at night is my kids celebrate and love the teachers that teach, and they cannot stand the assigners.
The assigners.
That's what they say. They say, this teacher is an assigner and this teacher is a teacher. That's like, they fit into two categories, and they love their teachers, and they dread going to the classes of their
The
assigners.
assigners. Can I ask, what do they say about their teachers? Like, those who teach, what are they? What are
They love
doing?
them as-
Some of these things?
Yes, as human beings, they love them.
I see.
They come home and they talk about what they learned in class, and they try to apply it to whatever it is we're talking about, the dinner table, life lessons, whatever.
Making connections to the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it varies by school too. I mean, I get kids at one school who talk more about their teachers and kids at other schools that talk more about their assigners.
And I have a granddaughter that loved reading last year and did not like math, the year before.
Okay.
This year it's just the opposite. And I said, how can that be? She said, it's the teacher.
Yeah.
I didn't like the teacher that was doing math 2 years ago. I love the teachers doing math now. And so it's a lot about that.
But I think also too, it's being that they feel that they're being seen. So I know like all my grandkids all over the district, when you speak to them, they have different theories of their teacher, but those who look at them as individuals and have that conversation, that one-on-one versus the, what did you call them? The assigners, right, the assigners were being taught by the avatar. I think that, they do have a better relationship with them, and they do feel that, and the littler ones feel that, I think because a lot of times they're in group settings versus, how the high schools, you're now
I see,
on
like
your
collaborative
own.
groups or small groups. Okay.
Yeah, I think that makes a difference too, on how they feel.
Yes.
So when I was looking at the information, for me, it's about respect and being heard, like Debbie just mentioned, because it doesn't stop at the middle school and high school. It even goes into adulthood. People start discrediting people and not looking at the person and how they think. Everybody's different and unique, and people don't embrace that. They actually try to discredit that person, and I think it happens in the classroom where the teachers are focused, probably laser focused on their lessons, but sometimes you have to incorporate the student that might be learns differently, looks at things differently, and embrace that, and so others can identify those differences. And I think sometimes we start, as adults even, I think we do it, we discredit, it's our way or the highway, and it's not really. Everyone learns differently, the perspectives are differently, and we should be embracing that more, and sometimes teachers aren't able to do that, or, people in general don't do it. Some do, some don't. It's just how you look at individuals individually and like I said, embracing that.
Yeah, understood. So just kind of reflecting on some of the shares, we definitely touched on like the impact of that individual teacher. You're talking about your granddaughter in that sense, and what role does curriculum play or instruction materials? And like my understanding as an educator of where my autonomy lies, where does it end? What am I able to do with instruction materials? Also about just mindsets of teachers and what you were touching on with assigners, right? And those who teach, who get to know and see the students, just building on what you shared, right? Part of the reason we brought this back in this section too is in our mission and vision discussion, we talked very much about students. I don't think there's any debate over whether or not like ultimately we want students to achieve, like that is very clear. There's a lot of alignment there. And in order to do that, right, part of it is considering what they're sharing and what they're saying to us, right? And in the same way that we want the students to feel seen, right, and heard when we're talking about instructional decision making, so too is that when it comes to making decisions about our priorities, right, and shaping those. So again, we offer this to you as we get into our priorities discussion. This is here. It's in the auxiliary data slides and in our main slide deck, so we can certainly come back to it. Okay. So what we're going to do now is review and reflect what are we reviewing and reflecting on? We're gonna review the 7 priority areas that we originally generated we began to generate at retreat number 1. Our team synthesized those. We want you to react to them. We had, again, like we had our survey, limited response count, but it's a data point. We're also gonna ask you to stack rank them too in a moment. And what we really wanna do is just first have a discussion about where we see alignment and where we see gaps. Alignment between what you believe, right, are your top 3 priority areas. That's not to say we're only gonna do 3. It's just for the sake of conversation. And then in the afternoon, when we get to objective writing, we may not have time to go deeply into every single priority because there's currently 7. If we consolidate, very, very possible. So that's part of the reason why we're gonna ask you to stack rank. So after that, really we're just gonna have a discussion about alignment where we see gaps. After we do that, we're gonna reflect on that discussion and say, you know what, I think, we could maybe collapse these 2 together, or we didn't even think about this, so we need to add that. We need to add another priority area. And this definition feels off, so I wanna change or amend that, okay? Then the last step before we go into lunch is gonna be the envisioning success. So ideally, we arrive at either we keep the list of 7 or we make some amendments and we say, okay, for our priority areas, this is more of a narrative form. This is what we want success to look like. That becomes a jumping off point for the objectives that we're writing in the afternoon, okay? So priorities in 3 steps. In order for us to do that, what I'm gonna ask you to do is this will work on your phone, you can use a computer as well. I'll ask the board and superintendent if you could take a couple moments to share your input here. All it's gonna ask you to do is say which priorities are most important, choose 3, and which priorities are most urgent, choose. Well, you can stack rank the 7 actually. This is not, we're not making any decisions, this is really just to inform our conversation. And if we need to, focus our effort when we start writing objectives. Let me know if you have any trouble getting into that.
Oops. Oh, come on. Okay, I can't get into
I
it.
can't either.
Okay.
I
You wanna
can
use my-
earlier,
I
yeah.
can give you a computer, use my computer, Chris' computer.
Are we only supposed to rank 3 of these?
For the important, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then
Out
the
of
second
the
question will be
7.
about accuracy, yes.
Okay, just wanna make sure.
I would-
Because it's asking.
Okay,
Is the,
no, it,
Should-
server stopped responding. I mean, okay. The district phone makes me put in the collaboratory and I can't.
Because they need to access.
So I'm using my own phone.
Oh, could do that.
What was that the problem?
yeah, let's see, because I was able to connect my phone. It took me a while.
Very slow. Oh,
Now, this code is,
Should I keep my computer?
very happy.
okay.
Thank you so much.
Sounds right.
It's gonna record my name, but we'll know that it was not me.
Thank you.
You might have to hit accept at the top. See,
Oh, yes.
the checkbox, yeah,
Okay, thank you.
that should work.
Good. Thanks, Chris. Spinning. Do I want to share the Wi-Fi password for collaboratory guests with Melissa Giovanelli? Okay. Sharing.
So that last
Thank you.
extra,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean the concordance scores were changed or?
The governor said the concordance scores will now be reduced to what we said
What you said.
earlier. What we
That's
said
what I took it
earlier.
as.
So now, that's why you'll see some of the teams scrambling, they're starting to look at, so they've been testing and trying to get those concordance scores, so now the high schools have now until
3, 2, 1,
graduation day, basically,
4, 6,
if the kids are
3,
on the
7.
finish line.
But it's good news or bad?
Good news.
That's what I thought.
Good news to increase graduation rate. Difficult news because we, once
Oh, you
again,
find
have lowered the standards slightly.
Was it Education Week or US News and World Report that just ranked Florida #1 in the country?
Oh, come on.
It was
Oh,
just
Slash.
a low report, I'm not
Which
sure.
is shocking because they usually pick funding per student into account when they do those rankings.
Yes, I think Ed Week does.
I thought Ed Week didn't, and that's why Florida was usually so much higher than those commercial,
Then I'll give it to you.
Let's check. I thought it was US News.
regardless.
3, 2, 1,
2.
4, 6, 3, 7.
This is too many choices.
Why is this doing that? Okay, here we go. Okay.
It takes
Easier to do the urgency first than do the other.
That's what I'm gonna go back to my ranking in a minute.
Change it, that's what I had to do.
Now, if you just round up and type it that way, it should be.
It's complicated.
Oh, so we have to pick 1 through 2, 1 through 7, everybody can't be 1.
No, everything can't be one.
Yeah,
Please God, let your superintendent
I gotta redo it.
have a moment.
These are all 1 to me.
I agree, but
I think everyone's okay now. Yep, everyone's welcome. Okay. At least.
I just re-ranked my birds, you have to move all my scores.
What's internal operating systems? Like the-
HR
All of that, everything that, yep.
Well,
Oh, shoot.
it's about specific internal, it's also about specific
Try this
processes. We don't have processes for a lot of things.
Did you think I was staring at your forehead this whole
I
time?
I wasn't sure.
I thought she was staring at me too. I was gonna say.
What is she-
This is like really
What
hard
is
for
she
me.
looking at?
I
When
felt like-
I
I
turned
felt the
around, and
same.
it's like, she has her own screen.
I was wondering that before too.
I love that you're a little.
You're like, is she
I was thinking that
paying
too.
attention to anything?
I was asked her how
I was
she
looking
there
at
now,
the
actually,
and I
very
caught her eye, I'm like, what is she looking at?
I was thinking the same thing. Oh,
Now I know.
I was gonna ask her separately, was she feeling okay?
So you're gonna do urgency and match it to your priorities?
Well, not only that, then I messed up because it's
Yeah, I-
emergency, I didn't realize there were 7 on my phone, it only went 4 across. I had to
right. Me too.
sideways.
All right.
Oh, I don't know that I like what I'm saying.
I know, is there a right or wrong here?
No. Wrong is everything being priority 1,
Yeah.
even though they're all priority 1.
They are.
Okay. All right.
Good?
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. To the rattle of the paper.
I think I remember doing this on evaluation, then I just didn't work.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't like the order after about 4.
I know, because my top priorities can't be met without some of my lower priorities being addressed first.
So I moved,
So how did you do
so I
that?
moved it up.
Yeah, well,
Even though I don't think that's our number one priority,
It's
I can't
not.
do some of the other things unless I have high-quality teachers.
You'll find that sentiment shared. by
Yeah,
many.
and like you can't make kids ready for life after high school if you don't have equitable learning.
Correct, or high-quality teachers or developed leaders.
Right.
Because you need somebody to set that.
All right, I know a few of you are still completing the survey. I'm not gonna advance the slides or anything, but again, we're gonna use, that data is not to make any, it's to inform decision-making, essentially, right? Because what we're gonna wanna do is say, given what we just shared right now, given what different stakeholders are sharing in terms of what they think are top three by importance and urgency, what does that mean for us? And then is there opportunity for us to consolidate, or is there anything missing? Is essentially what we wanna have a discussion about. I think we're nearly done. So I'm just gonna start to look at a couple of the slides from the survey. And again, like while it was 24 responses, what I want you to pay attention to is the alignment across the groups and that consistency between, or not, look at the data, between urgency and importance, okay? So these are the questions that we are asking. This is essentially what we asked the survey respondents. We asked them similar question, or same question, importance and urgency. So regardless of group, this is where we landed. What these numbers mean, those are not counts. What I did was I just looked at, it was like as you saw, like a 1 through 7, so I just did a weighted ranking essentially. So I kind of like flipped the numbers to get a count to more accurately show the counts. And what you see by importance and urgency very clearly is retaining highly qualified teachers, right? Providing engagement instruction across both, I mean, they mirror each other essentially down the line. This is not breaking it up by group, okay? What I would also add is that with the DAC group, if you look at the Jamboards, one thing that we did is ask them to choose the top 3 by level. I think that the largest group was probably about 50. I think middle school had maybe like 30 something, and high school was maybe high teens. So not a massive group, but certainly more than the survey responses. It was these top 4 essentially, like across those, in different orders though, in different orders. Okay, now looking at this in a slightly different way. So we have DAC, EDAC, CSI, and keeping in mind like EDAC was like just a handful of people, right? But still, retaining highly qualified teachers, you see it's, if not 1, it's top 2. So again, consistent, right? And providing engaging classroom instruction. Think about that too in the context of what we were just looking at. What we were just looking at being the Cognia data and the alignment between educators and students, or the dissonance between educators and students. Particularly on this one, and particularly about like knowing me as an individual, adapting lessons accordingly, etc. Okay, so you can see here, again, across the 3 groups, there's pretty clear alignment. What stood out to me though, and I'll go back to the previous slide, supporting and developing leaders consistently was pretty low, like across the different groups, right? Which depending on like who's responding, I can certainly understand that, right? And depending on like what your perspective is. So I just wanted to call that out. Okay. So before we go on, and we are going to look at the survey results in a moment. Before we go on though, just wanted to open up any reflections, questions. Oh, what you'll notice, Dr. Bernier, I see you.
I'm just comparing.
Yeah. Well, in case anyone's curious, some of them I doubled up. That's just because the score was the same. That's the only reason I did that. There was essentially a tie for that respective group. But any questions, reactions? Yeah.
So retaining highly qualified teachers, I know we're probably going to get to this next because we're talking about editing, but
Right.
shouldn't it be eliminating staff shortages? Because we don't just need teachers to make kids successful, and we don't need to just retain them. We need to get them in the door in the first place and then retain them. So I think that needs to be a broader category, and in those DAC breakouts, That's what I heard.
Yeah,
They ranked it as retaining highly qualified teachers, but they talked about everything
all,
surrounding.
all different types of employees.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard that in the high school group. Other thoughts? Let's see, just initial reactions. We're gonna get into it priority by priority area.
I would caution us against the chicken and the egg scenario. They're all urgent. We are gonna have to make some forced choices regarding priorities, right? We're gonna have to prioritize, but, you know, I don't know, I can see under EDAC, for instance, preparing for students for life after graduation. That's an outcome that's a priority for us. And then, it looks like they then move to recruitment and retaining of high-quality teachers in order to make that happen. But you could start with recruiting and retaining high-qualified teachers so that you could have graduation. We're not settling on a priority is what I'm trying to put out there, so.
They're looking at end results, but you need all of this to get to that.
Right.
Yeah.
I looked at it a little more like the EDAC. I said,
Okay.
we're a world-class, you know, our mission is for the students to achieve their highest. So that was my,
I see.
far as importance.
I see.
But under urgency, I put number one was retaining qualified teachers
I did
because
the
that's
same
what we
thing.
need in order to get to there.
I understood.
But like I say, they're also important.
Of course,
We sure, Brian.
of course.
Yeah, the same.
But, so I'm just gonna throw out the interconnected of this with one that doesn't seem to score as high. We all know the aspect of retaining teachers has to do with the building level principal.
Yes.
So while teachers have the greatest impact to student achievement, the greatest impact to a teacher coming and staying is their building leader.
Correct.
So it's,
Support.
it's just so,
Right.
Yeah, mine was
so
way up
amazing
there
how
on
they're
that.
connected to each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Randy, you can extend that too, Dr. Bernier, if you think about directors of a certain department, as, you know, if they're not in a building necessarily, but they're still the ones who are making sure the bus drivers are prepared, or cafeteria staff, and ready to help students achieve their highest potential, right? Yes. And I appreciate the chicken and the egg, calling that out, right? Because and you're kind of like talking about in some way too, because it's like, okay, well, preparing students for life after graduation, in some ways that represents when students will achieve their highest potential, because there's a trajectory that they're on, right? And like that potential is continuing to grow as students realize and learn more about themselves and their capabilities and are afforded more opportunities or fight for them, right? Or push for them, or people advocate on their behalf. But in order to get there, of course, we need people to be supportive. Okay. So what this leads us to, we're good, actually, I'm gonna go out of this for a second. What this leads us to and refresh, because we're gonna look at everybody, the board members shared with this data. And again, like Dr. Bernier mentioned, we're not trying to choose one. This is just to inform our conversation, right? And potentially help us to consolidate. We certainly do not have to consolidate. But what we're going to do now is moving into step 2, right? So we reflected a little bit on the different areas, the different priority areas. We wanna, as best we can, finalize our list for today. Again, this is gonna go through a number of rounds of feedback and review, so it's not final. It's final for today so that we can begin drafting objectives, okay? We're gonna have you reflect and really develop a point of view and say, you know what, no, we need to keep these 7, or it is these 7, but we need to up-level the teachers want to include different staff, whatever you think, that's the point of the conversation. And then we're gonna rewrite and make proposals for anything that we might wanna rewrite. And then discuss as a group, and that's gonna bring us into envisioning success, okay? Before we get there though, okay, so this is by importance, so from all of you who responded, okay? This is by importance. So we have, you see the colors, right, represent how we voted on those. Okay. So which means that, and Chris was, while you were responding, and I was talking up here, Chris was putting these into the slide. So Chris, that means that if they're not on here, they were not selected.
Yeah, there's 2 that are not on there.
Okay.
There were no votes for first, second, or third.
Okay. That was the internal operations, right? Yes. And, so that's what I was saying.
External.
Community partnerships, yes, thank you. So, preparing students for life after graduation, spiked, right, as a number 1. Providing engaging classroom instruction, a number of you voted 4 votes at number 2. Obtaining high-quality teachers. So, pretty aligned, right, with the what we're seeing from the survey responses from the different groups. The ordering is a bit different, but that depends on the group as well. But there's some alignment there. Okay. But what I would invite you to think about too is like, what does it mean that we didn't choose the other 2, community partnerships and improving internal operations? So we should revisit that and like think about what we want to do with that.
Because you only gave us 3 choices.
Yeah, but the operations was an urgent matter for me. It wasn't an important matter, but it was urgent.
Fair.
Interesting.
We did only give you 3 choices.
Yeah.
You're right. But the fact that it was not one of those 3 is worth conversation, that's all I'm saying. But you're right. Now, looking across all 7 by urgency. Take a moment to look at this.
Teachers.
If anyone struggles with colors, like me, check me on this. So, okay, retaining highly qualified teachers, the blue, I guess is the blue. I was getting confused by some of the magentas and purples and red. Providing engaging instruction, classroom instruction, that seems to be.
It's also just an oriented from, this way left to right.
Oh, right,
So if
okay.
you see higher values to the left, that means there was more first, second,
I
third
see.
voting.
Okay, right.
Higher values to the right means there was more 5th, 6th, 7th
Got it.
trends for that specific priority.
Got it. Okay. Any reactions to this or on the importance or questions, clarifying questions?
Chris, can I go back and just get some clarification on what you said? You said to the right, there's more 5th, 6th, 7th responses,
So,
but the,
The left is the 1s and 2s.
like if I'm looking at this priority,
right,
see how it's skewed to the left?
right,
That means there was more first, second, third votes, higher urgency.
okay,
What do you mean left of center of that?
so within each graph, not,
Within each priority, yes, sorry for not clarifying. For instance, this one skewed to the right.
right,
More votes within this metric, more votes for 5th, 6th, and 7th for strength and
Got it.
Thank you for that.
understood. Yeah, I was looking at
Same.
left to right
That was
from, no, well, that's why I wanted to clarify. Sorry, Mrs. Morgan, I know you're getting ready to ask a question.
Oh, no, I was just going to make a comment.
Sure, please.
Strengthening community partnerships. It has 2 components. One, we need community partnerships in order to accomplish some of these things. But also, we don't get community partnership until we establish that we're entitled to or have earned their participation. So, most people put it last because everything else is so important. But in fact, we do need the community if we're going to do
Yes.
life after graduation.
Right. Thank you for calling that out, right? Because just to build on what you're saying, right? How do we prepare students for life after graduation? There's many ways you could do that. One of them is internships. Well, how do you do that? Well, we need community partnerships. Well, have we shown that some of our academies or some of our programming is, do we want to invite those students in as a community partner? Like, why would we want to do that, right? But I think what you're hitting on, a number of you have hit on, is the intersections and interdependencies of all these things, right? There's no, we're going to have a refreshed strategic plan. We'll get that done, and we're going to get that done together. But in actuality, right, delivering on that plan and living it, we know that it's much more complex and complicated in terms of how much these things rely on each other or one kind of unlocks something else. We're certainly aware of that, right? And I know you all know that. But what this can help us to do, right, is see from like a pulse perspective, where are people's heads? Where are people's hearts and minds, right? And like, what are they thinking? And where do we have that alignment to know, to validate what we might be feeling and what the data is telling us as well, right? And I think we're starting to see that, right? So when we look at specifically retaining highly qualified teachers, that's consistent across like anybody else who responded to the survey. Providing engaging classroom instruction, the students are telling us loud and clear. Right? The students are telling us loud and clear, and they're giving us input there. Now, that might be different by school. I don't want to make any generalizations here, but from a systems level, the trend is clear, okay? So again, alignment. So we do have some alignment here when we're looking across multiple sets of data, and that's really why we wanted to share this with you, okay? So I ask for you now, moving forward here, is, and we can go back to any slides, we can share the deck with you as well. I'm gonna go back to the 7 priority areas. I'm gonna go back to, after I orient you, I'm gonna go back to the slide that has the 7 priority areas listed and those high-level definitions, okay? Essentially what my ask for you is, for each priority areas and overall for the list, do we wanna keep it? Like, yes, these are the 7, keep them as is. Or do we want to make minor changes to those 7? So I want to start there first, right, is on the broader level. Do we want to rewrite that list, right, and make it new? Is there anything that's missing? Envisioning success, we're going to come back to that, so don't worry about right here, okay? But really, the main question is, are these the 7 priorities? Based on what students are sharing through that Cognia survey data, based on what different stakeholder groups are sharing, do we want to amend that list? Let me go back to that list, speaking of. Okay. So would you want to see any of these collapsed or combined? I know, and again, like at this broad priority level, we also talked about, remember particularly you talked about up-leveling to workforce, for example, instead of just teachers. So this would be the time when we want to do that. So we want to focus on that first column.
Am I supposed to write it down?
That was explicit instruction. Put it on here because you're gonna put stickers.
Where are the
We're just going to have a conversation right now.
Oh, conversation.
So is it about the definitions?
No, not definitions.
It's about the.
Do we want to keep these 7 priorities?
Are these,
as
yes, do we want to
priorities?
keep these 7? Do we want to change these 7?
Add,
Consolidate them.
Can we consolidate them?
add or omit?
Add or amend?
I vote for no change.
I've already said that I want to eliminate staff shortages,
Eliminate staff shortages.
because I think that includes teachers, bus drivers, food service workers, everybody that we need, and it includes retaining and recruiting.
Yes.
Might that be an objective?
Doesn't say staff shortage.
Because that's very measurable. That's why. I hear you.
She wants to make that change.
So it isn't retaining highly qualified teachers, that's measurable as well.
Sure.
I just think it's a bigger category.
Okay.
That's the first thing that strikes me. The second thing that strikes me is none of this works without supportive parents, and we're not talking about engaging parents here.
So one thing that you're proposing is eliminating staff shortages, right? Any other?
So writing the words eliminating staff shortages is what you're asking to.
Instead of retaining.
Instead of the word
qualified teachers,
retaining.
yes.
Well, it is about retaining because the cost of retaining is a lot less than hiring. We know that. And I don't care what kind of business that you're in. That's always your objective, is to retain your staff, especially if they're highly qualified. Which then brings our children where they need to go. And in strengthening community, you can always add family to that, strengthening family and community partnerships.
I mean, we all know we have a shortage of teachers, but we also all know we have a shortage, say, bus drivers.
Exactly.
So I mean, we need to make priority, I agree.
And
I mean,
best
it may
teachers.
need support staff, could you have
Just,
leaders there?
just
Could
retain.
you have teachers there, so maybe we should put something in there for support staff, just a new one.
Retain
I would
highly
say
qualified
retain highly
teachers,
qualified
decrease.
teachers and staff.
Right.
Or you can add them together.
It's everybody.
Can't we just say employee retention?
Could say employee retention. So what I am hearing though is yes, generally, we need to up-level it, okay? Or remember Chica too, like the eliminating, and that, we could certainly put that into the main title of the priority area, right? It could also be, here, right? We will eliminate staff shortages and et cetera, right? We can have a discussion about what else might be included here, okay? Just offering ideas here. But what I am sensing though is, and I'm seeing head nods to, absolutely teachers are important, absolutely want to retain them and recruit teachers, but absolutely so are our
Support staff.
support staff, yes,
Retaining highly qualified teachers and support staff.
and support staff. Okay.
Retaining.
Other thoughts? We're centering on retaining highly qualified
And
teachers.
decrease
We can
in staff shortage.
I think that, so I appreciate all the discussion. One thing I did not hear is we're talking about that particular one that's currently states retaining highly qualified teachers. I've heard the expansion of staff. I've heard about eliminating. I know it's just a miss. We also have to talk about the recruitment of. It's not just about retaining, because if it was just about retaining, that eliminates the fact that
Right.
there's a huge percentage of our workforce about to retire. And they're not going to stay. They're gonna go do fun things like sit in a beach chair.
Absolutely.
So,
That's
but
why I said
what we're
eliminate.
hearing, and I think this is
That includes that.
this is the good thing to hear, are those types of terms and capturing them so that when we get to what the priority is, we have that language included both in the statement of the priority and
Yeah.
in,
The definition.
and in the definition.
Recruit and retain highly qualified staff and teachers.
Staff and teachers, right?
And I do agree, we need to add
Recruit and
something
retain.
about parental involvement to
Okay,
foster, nourish, whatever you want.
understood.
I think it's about recruit, develop, and retain. Because that then gives us a chance to take away, not take away, but to take supporting and developing employees, not just leaders, and bring it into people come because they want to come, they stay because you continue to develop them, and they'll also stay long-term based upon the culture in which they work, which brings us back to our values. If we can make those values live in a speak up, listen up culture, we're in a better spot to not only attract people, but then they'll stay also because they're being developed. They see an opportunity for them to grow within the organization, and then that should impact retention as well.
And-
I'm sort of driving, so you see where my head goes, right? I'm
Yes.
starting to think about what the objectives are, and I know that's not our task, so I'm gonna be quiet.
Supporting,
That makes sense.
supporting
Mhm.
those.
Supporting and developing.
So then, I definitely want to come back to the parents and
Fine, we
families.
can stay on this right now.
Yes, sir. So we can, supporting and developing leaders, right? So that's a question for you. If we're up-leveling this, recruiting, retaining, and developing
Highly qualified
highly
teachers
qualified
and
teachers
staff.
and staff, does that mean that includes leaders? I would think yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, great. So then, that's one. Feels like we have some good alignment there. Okay.
All right.
Now, in the next go-around, we're gonna have to talk about though is some of these definitions, right? The most important thing though for us now is getting clarity. Of course, we need to know what these mean, but what is this list? Because we wanna get into objective writing.
So when you look at that particular item that's been sort of potentially rewritten, one of the things that I'll call out when doing this for the people seated
Yes.
behind me is when we talk about recruitment, supporting and developing and retaining highly qualified teachers and staff, one of those pieces that I think is vital for us to come back to you, there's many, but one of the things that's important to me is how do we develop leaders and I've shared this with all of you, at a transactional level, how do they know to do their work, right? How do they know this is how you put in a purchase order, and this is how you spend money correctly, and this is how, but I also want to develop them at a transactional level. How do they make those values live? How do they interact with people when difficult things happen? How do they hold people accountable without driving people from the organization, right? So there's a whole cultural piece at a transformational level. We have to do a better job because we're seeing that, and I don't want to call it out, but we're seeing that in our emails where problems are being dealt with, but because of how they're dealt with, they lead to another and newer problem.
Yes.
Right, so that's where the group, that's why, I'm just speaking to the crowd that's watching us, that's why they're here, is if they can see how we combine or where we combine, then they can also start thinking about, this is not just an HR issue. It's not just on our human resource department to recruit and retain. It's a cross-functional, across anybody who works with an employee to be able to do that work. Because it allows children to reach their highest potential. And if we have really great recruitment and retention rates, we move closer to becoming a world-class organization. Sorry, I have to
That's a good
process
point.
out loud.
This is why we're here. Okay, so
My voice.
we have, so now we're at 6, right? So we have an amended priority that combine these and include staff, right? And speak to recruitment. Excellent. Let's talk about families. So we noticed that families is missing. We have strengthening community partnerships here. A couple people said that was absent, acknowledging families. Yes?
Yeah, well, so essentially you're talking about the external partnerships, and so I would just include family within.
Yeah,
Right.
As community,
yeah.
I agree.
family and community partnerships.
Because they could be one and the same too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it would be pretty clear, right? Fostering relationships with leaders across the community, families and leaders across the community, right?
Yeah, I would put families first, for sure.
Families, yeah. Understand. Okay. So keeping this, right, community partnerships, but amending that, excellent. Now, that leaves us with engaging classroom instruction, equitable learning environments. There's some overlap there, right? Now, they have different purposes. We can combine them, ensuring equitable and engaging classroom instruction. This was, the equitable learning environments too, that was particularly helpful listening to the DAC group. That was, let me be specific here. That was things like in high school, processes where as a student, I know I can figure out my schedule so I can take a program that I want to take. Or I understand like what the requirements are and it's clear and I can provide, documentation so that I'm admitted to a program, right? So when we're talking about that, like what we were hearing from people was some pretty like operational pieces to make it easier if I'm a student that I can have access to programming, right? Or a certain type of course like students in other schools. I'm giving a very specific example, but those are among the things that we heard. Chairman.
I'm just looking at all of them
Sure.
there. Somewhere we should be able to plug in safety also. Yeah, that was one of the questions that was asked for the teachers and the students or something. I
It
don't
was
know if there's
everybody.
a spot in there, but that's one of our highest priorities.
Oh, they agreed.
Yeah.
In speaking with each of you, we definitely, all of you talked about that. Everybody talked about safety, absolutely. Everybody talked about instruction. Interestingly too, when we asked the students where's the greatest alignment,
Right.
it's there, right? And so maintaining that, critical, of course.
Yeah.
So, yes.
A different topic whenever we're.
Oh, okay. Well, my question was just, so the, Chairman, you want to add the safety as its own priority area? Is that a proposal or just how?
Yes, you want to put
we
under
make sure-
learning environments, a safe learning environment or something.
Ensuring,
I see.
ensuring equitable and safe learning.
Equitable and safe.
Yeah. I hate adding more new ones.
I understand.
Combined.
How does that feel? I
It's
mean,
a good place to
My
live.
question is,
Yes.
does that does that take the focus away from equity and then take the focus away from safety? I feel like safety is
Yeah.
freestanding.
I'm good with either, just.
And I feel
just
like,
think it should-
based on those survey results, it would be maintaining as opposed to, like there we have strengthening community
I see what you mean.
partnerships.
Right.
It should probably be creating,
Creating.
but I'm not going back there. Um, So,
I hear your point, right? So then, keeping safe, so you're thinking safety should stand alone, maintaining,
I
it's
asked.
just an idea.
Yeah.
Ensuring seems to me like maintaining as well. It's an ongoing commitment to ensure that those things stay in place. I think with equitable,
While ensuring.
I just to wordsmith with all of you, ensuring's probably not maybe
The best.
where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ensuring seems to fit safety better than it does equity.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Just my thought.
Is what you want to say related to these or different?
It was about the engaging classroom
Okay,
instruction
okay.
part, so
We'll get there next.
till.
Okay. So it feels like ensuring or maintaining with safety, it feels like safety should be its own priority, okay? Well, okay, so why don't we talk about classroom instruction? Because I do think that there's some opportunity and some discussion we need to have. If equitable learning environments remains, it's gonna live somewhere, right? Does it remain as its own priority? Do we combine engaging instruction? I mean, that's a question, but I'm curious what you want to share.
I think it should be separate. I keep going back to the statistics that really hit me the first time
Okay.
of a retreat, and I forget the exact one, but, you know, do you want to continue, do you want to learn, you know, your next lesson or whatever it was, part of the engagement?
Oh, right.
I can't remember what the
Right.
criteria was. It kept
Yeah.
hitting me where, you know, elementary was very high and middle and high school as well. So I'd like to keep that separate. But going back to what Ms. Patrica said, it kind of got me thinking when she talks about teachers versus signers. Maybe a word choice difference of saying instead engaging students in or with classroom instruction. Kind of flipping it around that way.
In or with?
Either way.
I see.
Choice.
Engaging students in classroom instruction or engaging students with, I see.
Yeah, either. you know,
Instead of providing.
flipping that around, going that teachers versus signers route. That's how I'm looking at it. So,
I see what you mean.
But,
Right, because that in or with and leading with engaging,
yeah.
that makes the main thing the main
Do
thing.
you want to, because again, those statistics, again,
that's an
do you
excellent
want to,
Right.
you know, continue learning?
Because providing means, because students can also engage each other, right, through collaborative learning or like different programs, reflecting on their career path, et cetera. And so yes, the teacher is always going to be the facilitator and like there supervising and supporting, but appreciate the point and definitely heard. Okay, so engaging classroom instruction, leading with engaging students in and including students, engaging students in classroom instruction, removing providing, essentially, right? I'm taking a lot of head nods.
Yes.
So I'm taking that as, yes, this feels right. Okay. Chris? Good, getting this, okay. Yes,
Just wanted to go back to the safety for a second. I think we need to ensure safe learning and working environments, because not every employee is in a classroom. So it's not just learning environments, it's the whole district.
I do wonder, I'm just gonna throw it out there. I know we've used our house graphic. Some of you might be tired of seeing the house graphic, but I know we've been coming back to it. It has certain levels, right? What I'm wondering is, should safety be its own thing? Like, regardless of whatever's in the strategic plan, there's never gonna be a moment where, and I think you could probably make that argument about all of these, but no matter what, like, that is something that's gonna happen, right? And you are going to maintain that, right? And you are going to,
I think there are examples across the state and across the country where that is not true.
not true.
I think it needs to be a stated priority of this government.
No, I agree. What I'm saying is, it lives almost above all of these.
Every-
Sorry, I
yes.
explained that poorly.
Okay.
So in the house graphic, right, we have vision, mission, values, then it goes to priorities. What I'm saying is like, imagine safety being its,
Understood.
and explicitly stated. Sorry, that was unclear, yes.
That's what I was gonna say, ensuring safe, equitable learning environments. I mean, it's gotta be safe before they can learn. But I see what you're saying that, but if it's not, I mean, if it's not safe, then it may not be equitable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if it's not safe, even if it is equitable, right?
Yeah.
If it's not, you're 100% correct.
Right.
Maslow had safety
Yeah.
fund for a reason.
Okay, so I think what we could do is, we could add it, right, and have maintaining safe learning environment as its own. And then as we're drafting, as the Ed Elements team is drafting, have you react to it, right? So there's no world where safety is not prominently and explicitly included. It's just like, where do we include it, okay? All right, so just recapping here, we made decisions about recruiting, retaining highly qualified teachers and staff, right? We made a decision about engaging students in or with classroom instruction. We are going to include safety. And it feels like ensuring equitable learning environments stands on its own, right? Because we don't want it to be overshadowed by something else or vice versa, okay? We have not talked to improving, and we also talked about strengthening community partnerships, strengthening family and community partnerships, creating potentially, right? Creating or strengthening family and community partnerships. We haven't talked about improving internal operating systems. So I just wanted to open it up. So one we haven't discussed yet. Do we keep it there? Is that more of within? So what I would offer too is just a way to think about it, right? You could have objectives. You could obviously leave it. You could also make sure that there's objectives across these priority areas that speak to, right, or begin to get at some of the operational systems that support these respective areas. Yes.
As a board, I mean, the operational, which is your internal operating systems, is through the superintendent.
Yes.
So we observe and we fund and we do things like that.
Right.
But, I mean, if it wasn't there, I mean, if it falls apart, like any of these really, it all falls apart.
Right.
So I definitely think it should be left,
I do too.
without a doubt. Super important.
While operations, and we've blended that line nicely with this board, while operations, and I know you have your middle line, I have tried to be extremely transparent about what's been going on the operational side of the house. This is another opportunity to be transparent because, and I know I'm getting, he'll reel me right back in here. But one of the things is once we know what these are and once we know what the objectives are, then one of the things we'll be responsible for is coming up with the reporting structure. So that in August, we're reporting on this, in September, we're reporting on that. So at some point, I'm reporting on improving internal operation systems. And we're looking at construction and we're looking at transportation. And recently, we just got an email about electric buses and a statewide grant for us to purchase maybe up to 4 or 5 of them. And then look at the difference. So that would be something we potentially could put in the strategic plan as an objective that we would report out on. And then we could make some decisions as a board as to whether we'd like to expand that program or not. So
Yes.
something missing for me, and I know it's here, but I'd like to know the board's idea of where it lands.
Okay.
Where does reading, writing, math, graduation, where does it land? And so I'm talking more about objective, right? But where does it land in these?
Preparing students for life after graduation.
Yeah.
You start with that
To me, that's improving student outcomes. To me, it's
Okay, I just
stated differently.
wanted somebody to put it out there and see whether the other people agreed.
Any other thoughts on that?
So that's where, I'm sorry. Good question, Micah. Let that question stand.
Yeah, okay. Right, because it's, right, without those essential skills and capabilities, certainly not prepared. But the other thing too is, obviously adults play a role in all of these. But providing engaging classroom instruction, there's certainly like professional development elements and like coaching to that, whereas there will be that as well, I would imagine, for preparing students for life after graduation, but it's just a different focus, right? Okay, so Chris, are we good?
Lunch and yes.
All right, so our last activity then before lunch is to begin to envision success, okay? So I'm gonna do kind of something in parallel while I give you this prompt to respond to. But my ask for you is to choose one of the priority areas. Take a Post-it note and think about what envisioning success looks like. So like if we know we've arrived, we know we have achieved or accomplished progress, when what? What does that look like to you? Okay, I'm particularly curious, just given how we voted in the stack ranking and also what stakeholders shared in surveys and live. I'm particularly curious on recruiting and retaining highly qualified teachers and staff and developing, engaging students in classroom instruction and preparing students for life after graduation. That's not to say, the other that don't matter. It's just that because those came to the top very consistently across different groups, I'm particularly curious, what does success look like to you across these three? Keep in mind that we're going to get into like more tactical objectives after lunch. So this is kind of a bridge to get us there, but in a more narrative form, like what does that look like to you? How would you describe it? So I'll give you a minute to process. I'm going to update these while you're writing. We're going to do a share out and then we're going to head to lunch.
Thank you.
And feel free, you could do multiple. Share.
Where do you want to?
We're going to share and then she's going to grab a post.
Oh, brother. I'm not sharing. I wrote my thought down.
What was the last one? What was the last one? Preventing engaging classroom instruction, preparing students for life after graduation, retaining highly qualified teachers.
Retaining, thank you.
I think warmer work environments would allow us to retain more employees as well.
Yeah.
It's a small bump in the electricity bill, but can't put a price on happiness.
Would make me leave.
It would make you leave.
Yes.
It was freezing in Disney. We were right on the ocean. Oh my gosh, it was freezing. It was like winter.
Yeah.
It was cold.
All right. So couple minutes, then we're gonna take a longer break and have some lunch. I'm just curious to hear, if we could share out. Anybody can start. Just share some of your thoughts on what success looks like. Tell us what the priority area is.
I did preparing students for life after graduation. I just think every student should be either prepared to go to college or further their education, or to be able to go into the workforce.
Okay, I got that.
Sure.
So college or workforce?
Or workforce.
Okay.
Or military.
Or military.
Or military, that's,
Right.
I'm in.
That's workforce.
Other thoughts on envisioning success for these priority areas?
I did all three.
Great.
Eliminate staff shortages and decrease resignations by blank percent. I don't know what that percent is, and I
percent is?
specifically isolated resignations because I don't think you can get rid of retirements, but resignations we can get rid of.
Okay.
Preparing students, I had 95% graduation rate only because I stole that from your earlier
Sure,
slide. And 95% college or career placement after graduation.
Okay.
And then providing engaging instruction, let teachers teach, less state/district prescription.
Thank you.
One note about that aspect of resignation.
Okay.
There'll be something we'll have to tackle and explain at a deeper level, but if you are in the new investment program of the Florida retirement system, you are not officially retired until you take a disbursement. So when you leave the organization, you're not retiring, you're resigning. Only after you take a disbursement does your situation get moved. So that becomes, I know that's a wordsmithing thing, but it can impact numbers. And it's kind of like when we talk retention.
Right.
And is that retention at a school, retention in a system?
Right.
So I just wanted people to be aware. I learned it this week.
Other thoughts? Success?
I wrote down things that weren't so quantitative in their measurement because you gave numbers. It's more, when educators are leaving other districts so that they can be a part of this county and this district, then I see that as being successful.
That's really great.
Interesting.
Instead of the opposite.
That's a
Great.
good metric, though. We can track that.
When we start to see an increase of former students graduating, come back to work and be a member of this community, which might take time. And then when we sit at the dinner table, hearing students thriving and enjoying their day-to-day schedule at the secondary level, which seems to be very troubling to me as I have a teenager as well, a preteen and a third grader. It's interesting to hear the conversation at the dinner table and how vastly different they are, especially with teachers versus assigners, like you had brought up before. And it's disheartening to hear that secondary education, those students aren't enjoying their day-to-day lives in the classroom. So that one just keeps hitting me at home. And I know we keep talking about it, so that's it.
Thank you. Can I grab those from you?
Sure. I don't know, I didn't put a category. So.
Okay, you don't need to. You got it. Yes.
Mine were a little more broad, but I just had 100% graduation rate, because I like to shoot high, and then I got high retention rate. We don't want to lose anyone, and then a strong economy, because I think a strong economy kind of goes back to what you were saying, just reflects on, we want people to stay where they're at, and
Right.
we don't want to lose them to other counties, as we know we do.
Thank you. Can I grab that from you? Thank you. Other thoughts? Yes.
Okay, so I just did a metric for retaining. I said staff turnover of highly qualified, the turnover of highly qualified staff is at a rate less than or equal to the KPI. So I'm looking, I'm just trying to figure
Right.
out, okay.
Understood.
And then for engaging students, parity in the educator and student response to the question about are they getting engaging and relevant instruction in learning? So eliminate that disparity.
Okay.
And then for business or community partnerships, community business investment in career and tech academies, which means dollar investing in bays and providing the technical staff.
Excellent. All right, thank you.
There you go.
Thank you. Other final thoughts on success? And we're gonna be coming back to success when we get into objectives. We already have some, as excellent starting off points after lunch. Yeah,
I just put for preparing students, prepare them, meet them where they are, and make sure that they have the tools to succeed.
okay,
And then treating with respect and value, so they don't want to be anywhere else but this district. And then providing an engaging classroom, include the students and make them feel seen.
thank you. Sir,
I'm actually going backwards on this, so I apologize. The more student success, I had very similar designating pathway, just like Mr. Person said. But going back to the broad category makes me think, why aren't we just saying preparing students for success after graduation? The more and more I read that, the more and more I hear that. I know I'm going backwards, so my
Okay.
apologies, it was just.
yeah, I mean, right, what is that really about? Right, and like, and then, that's a good push, right, because that's also this, why is that a good push? If we think about the mission, right, what's the mission? Highest potential.
Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be hard to argue like, oh, well, Justin reached his highest potential, but he's like, it's possible, right? But that's what you're pushing on, is like, well, what is that really about? It's about them being successful. Not just to be and like live, we want.
And
we want
it's
it to
in
be
the
it.
objectives,
Exactly.
so.
Great. Did you have another one, or that's the main one since it's?
I mean, I had
different than the
a
other?
teacher staff, I just had a quick one, net positive of employees, and then keep employee retention average at X years, whatever.
Right.
that-
Just the structure, depending on what, right, understand. Okay, excellent. I'm gonna grab those from you in a second. So when we come back, we'll break until 12:45. What time is it? 12 now? Yeah.
Called in.
Say it again?
He's waiting for his turn.
Come back at 12:45. Lunches, Chris, we're good? Everything's out there?
I'm good.
Yeah.
I'll want to set it up here.
Oh, you're gonna sit up here,
Yeah, so
okay.
give me like a few minutes, we'll set it up and then.
Okay.
Feel free.
When we come back, we're gonna get into objective writing, picking up on some of this thinking, but continue to work down into the house. And yeah, if you need anything, like please come talk to Chris and I. Any questions about the afternoon or feedback for us, we certainly welcome it. Otherwise, please enjoy lunch and thank you for just being so present and engaged.
All right, 12:02, recess time.
I can push on my team and start moving up.
Yeah.
Based upon hearing your discussions, I can now start addressing
Yes.
how do we